Welcome back to the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Okay, welcome back to the show, and today I'm joined by actor and producer Mr. Evan Ginzburg. How are you doing today, man?
Oh, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. I think we could have started the show maybe 20 minutes ago when we were talking, but we just said we'd hit record now or we'll lose all our material.
That's right. Sometimes the pre-interview is better than the interview, so you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, and nobody will ever know what we said.
That's right. We were trashing everybody. No, I'm joking.
Not that anyone would care if I trashed anybody, because I'm a nobody, so nobody would care if I trashed anyone at this point.
Nah.
Yeah. So I gather the world of wrestling was special to you from a young age. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. When I was a kid, we had what was called the UHF dial. It was this mysterious dial, and there were a lot of foreign language and public broadcasting type channels. And one rainy day back in the 70s, I'm 103 years old now, back in the 1970s, I'm flipping that dial, and all of a sudden I see this big monstrous guy pounding on this guy. And I didn't even know what it was. I'm a kid. And it turned out it was Chief Jay Strongbow, and it was the WWF TV tapings, and this big monstrous guy is beating up the chief, and all of a sudden he does this herky-jerky war dance, and he comes back, and like my eyes are wide open, like, what is this? It's like I discovered this magical, superheroes and supervillains, and yeah, man, it was like I'm talking 50 years I'm watching wrestling, 50 years. And my dad took me, my first match, I could tell you the date, June 24, 1974, Madison Square Garden. And I entered the arena, and I looked, I was like in awe, and I'm like, wow, it's in color, because we had a black and white TV. Okay. And I'm a kid, and I'm like, it's in color, And the main event that night was Nikolai Volkov and Fred Blassie against Bruno Sammartino and Chief Jay Strongbow. And the co-feature was the Valiant brothers, Jimmy and Johnny, against Dean Ho and Tony Gurria. Also on the card, Killer Kowalski. And decades later, if somebody had told me that Nikolai Volkov, Johnny Valiant, Jimmy Valiant, Kowalski would be friends of mine, I would have said, you're crazy. Because as a kid, these guys were, 10 feet tall. Like Marvel superheroes and villains come to life. And it was just magic. And my dad started taking me to Madison Square Garden, Nassau Coliseum, Westchester County Center. It was kind of like the A, B, and C circuit of the WWF. So I saw it, in all different levels. And these guys had unbelievable charisma. And you have to understand, back then, there was no pyro, no blaring music, no nothing. Billy Graham and Bruno, for example, would walk down the aisle at the Garden, and the building would shake. The building, 22,000 people, 4,000 or 5,000 more in the adjoining building on closed circuit TV because they couldn't get in. You're looking at 27,000 people, and the building would just shake just from sheer charisma. And when people today do the, oh, they were overrated, they were just punching and kicking, they don't quite understand that this was a blue collar mark audience. This was pre-internet. This was pre-smartened up wrestling fans. When Billy Graham's punching Bruno, you're feeling it. You understand? It was a different world. It was especially as a kid, because you're even more naive. Eventually you just become smartened up being around it long enough. But yeah, man, it was magical times. And when people knock these guys, Pedro Morales, and they don't quite understand. Yeah, they weren't Will Ospreay, they weren't Daniel Bryan, but it was a different kind of magic. Is the best way I could explain it. Yeah.
Do you think, from over here, from my point of view, I feel like obviously wrestling was massive in the 80s, peaked again in the 90s, was still kind of big into 2000s. Do you think that the popularity of wrestling has declined in a pop culture kind of sense from a casual point of view, casual audience? Like, is wrestling as big now as it was in the 90s or in the 80s in America, or do you hear less about it, do you think?
It's not anywhere as big as during the Hulkamania era, when Piper and Hogan and The Rock and Wrestling, Cyndi Lauper and Wendy Richter. No, it's nowhere near as. Back then, you just walk down the street in New York and you'd see kids with all the T-shirts and the gear. Now it's more, a television product where you could watch wrestling literally 24/7 if you chose to. I mean, it's more accessible, but it's, you could say Vince is making more money than ever before, but it's not that pop culture level. And I'm not one of these guys with the Nielsen ratings where these guys agonize over it, AEW and WWE, the ratings battles. But if you look at the numbers, it's not going to be anywhere near as big as it was, decades ago, because there's thousands and thousands of channels now on top of everything else. And, there's too many choices. So, yeah, I would say in the mid 80s was the peak, that Hulkamania era.
Do you think a lot of it comes down to, like, I see, like, we'll say particularly WWE, you'd have guys coming out and they all kind of maybe dress the same, they kind of maybe look the same. I feel like that when I'm watching it, that there's none of that character development these days. They're all great wrestlers, like, don't get me wrong, but nobody has kind of their own maybe unique style, even when it comes to entrance music and kind of dress sense and stuff like that. That's just my own personal opinion on it. I don't find like there's these larger than life characters that even we had in the 90s, would say, as well.
Well, part of the problem is a lot of these guys are just plain stale. Once it became corporate wrestling, Vince is pushing a lot of the same guys for 15 years. 15 years. Cena's moved on to bigger and better things. He's a major movie star. But Cena and Orton wrestled, no exaggeration, over 250 times. At what point do you go, that's enough? I don't need to see these two, as good as they are, I don't need to see these two guys wrestle. And so move it up to today. How many times do you need to watch the Usos wrestle New Day? How many times? At some point, do you go, the first 100 times was enough? The second 100 times was enough? And they're good. I mean, they're damn good wrestlers. But my point being, it's stale. And this is an interesting tidbit that some people may not know. At one point, I believe it was Shane McMahon, the McMahon family publicly stated, we don't want anybody bigger than WWE. The Rock became much bigger than WWE. He didn't need them. You see what my point being?
Yep.
So anybody, Sasha Banks and Naomi walked off, and they're like, okay, we got 50 other women. We'll be fine. And so I don't think they want anybody so huge, so big that the machine would just stop running, you know, and part of the reason they'll promote the same guys not only for 15 years, they'll do 20 years if they're still moving the t-shirts and the merchandise, and that's that. And if Roman Reigns one day becomes a big movie star and leaves, you know, now they're grooming Theory or whatnot. You know, at some point they'll have the next guy to be the cog in the wheel.
I'm thinking our guy, and I always say it from a biased point of view, like Finn Balor is a great athlete. He's from Ireland.
They nuded Finn Balor. We say Balor, you say Balor.
Yeah. Balor, yeah.
Either or, but they nuded this guy. This guy, I saw him as Prince Devitt, you know, in New York, New Japan. The guy's tremendous. He's just another warm body on a card now. Same with Nakamura. You know, they squander as much. Nakamura was top 5 in the world when he was headlining for New Japan.
Now he's a gimmick.
Now he's just another warm body, and it's a shame. It's a shame. So my point is, those guys are stale. Those guys are stale, and WWE has this 50-50 booking. It doesn't matter wins and losses. No, it does matter. It does matter. Dolph Ziggler can't lose 5,000 times, and all of a sudden he's the #1 contender. Nobody's going to take it seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It's there's a lot. Look, I call it as I see it. They had Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins and Hell in a Cell. That's tremendous, absolutely tremendous. But much of WWE TV is stultifying. It's numbing. I can't sit through a Raw anymore. I just can't. It's
too long.
It's like I'm just fighting to stay awake, and it's not pleasurable. I mean, that
I used to stay up for it. I used to stay up for it here, but it runs till about 4:30 a.m. here now, and I just can't do it anymore.
I can't do it till 11 p.m. It's numbing, you know. Yeah.
We kind of went off track there, but it was all relevant. When it came to, like, you were working on The Wrestler, we'll say in 2008, and we'll get into that in a minute. But before that, I want to know, did you have any background in movies, or was it ever something that you wanted to do before that opportunity came along?
Well, I was, and still am to a degree, an agent in pro wrestling. And one day I had Johnny Valiant and Nikolai Volkov booked for an autograph appearance at a wrestling store in New York. And by sheer coincidence, the executive producer of The Wrestler, Scott Franklin's best friend, walked in. And for the people who get confused with the titles, executive producer is the money guy. He makes the deals. He gets the funding for the movie. I was the associate producer. I was the quote unquote wrestling guy. I did a half dozen casting calls with the various wrestlers, brought in the ring, Mickey's trainer, Mickey's stunt double, etc. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm at this wrestling store with Nikolai and Johnny, and Johnny did stand-up comedy. He was like one of the funniest guys on the planet. And Nikolai is like one of the warmest, nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. And we just hit it off with this guy. And he's like, listen, you guys would be perfect for this project we're nurturing at the time. This was like 2001. So didn't hear anything for a couple of months. And all of a sudden, hey, Evan, this is, you want to meet with Aronofsky? Bring Johnny, bring Nikolai, bring anybody you want. And so next thing you know, we're having a meeting. And actually, it was a dinner. And Johnny has him laughing, and Nikolai has him laughing, and we just all like hit it off. And next thing I know, Evan, would you like to be associate producer on the movie? I go, of course. Like, it's an opportunity of a lifetime. And it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. And ironically, I had done a movie before that. It was a documentary called Wrestling Then and Now, which was basically about me as a mild-mannered school teacher who's like Alter Ego was involved with pro wrestling on the side, you know, doing agent work and such. And we basically the director, Dwayne Walker, followed me around, and we went to Nikolai's place, and we went to Killer Kowalski and Homicide, of all people. I knew Homicide from New York. And so we did this like shot on pennies, no budget, but from the heart documentary. So yeah, ironically, I had done a film project prior to The Wrestler and many more subsequently. But yeah, it's but The Wrestler, I'll tell you, we were at the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center, 2,300 people, sold out, $40 a ticket. And I'm with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and she looks at the screen, she looks at me, she looks at the screen, she looks at me. She goes, "That's you," because Aronofsky had actually thrown me in to act with Mickey in the movie.
Convention, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll tell you the convention story. This is kind of sad, actually. I took Aronofsky and Scott Franklin and the screenwriter and a bunch of the other crew to a convention in Jersey. And it was basically the WWE Hall of Fame. It was Albano, Iron Sheik, Nikolai, Johnny Valiant, Moolah, Mae Young. You know, this is going back, 15 or more years at this point. So it's a little, but those are the ones I remember. And there's nobody there. There's nobody there. I'm talking like 20 or 30 people and all these legends. And it was so dead there that Iron Sheik's head was on the table asleep. That's how bad it was. And Aronofsky, who's a nice guy, his mom's a school teacher, and he comes from he's not like a rich kid, and he's like, "Evan, where is everybody? What's going on? What's wrong?" Like, it bothered him. And the screenwriter, this was not in the original script. He added it. There were 5 or 6 screenplays during the process. We worked on this like 7 years. People think it's all like Dark Side of the Ring. You just churn them out. This took 7 years. People don't realize. So off and on. I mean, it was, But so next thing you know, we're filming this really sad autograph scene, and that's basically all my merchandise on those tables. So I was even doing set design. This is what happens on a low budget film. This was a $6 million film. $6 million for people that don't really know movies. It's like the food budget on the Avengers. Okay, the food budget. All right. Yeah. So $6 million, and so I'm on set, just hanging out, watching, and Aronofsky gets this smirk all of a sudden. He goes, "Evan, come here." I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "I want you to walk up to Mickey last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid." And I'm not an actor. I've never acted in my life. So Mickey whispers in my ear, he goes, "Just improv it." Like I'm Mickey Rourke all of a sudden. I'm improving acting. I've never acted in my life. So the extras, the only other actual wrestlers that were there were Manny Yarborough, who was an 800-pound sumo. He was in the early UFC, black sumo, and he was a friend of mine. And Johnny Valiant, but Johnny Valiant's hair was gray. It wasn't dyed blonde like the Valiant brothers. And people sometimes don't even realize that's Johnny Valiant in that scene also. But the others were all extras, actors. So I make my way up to Mickey, and the whole time I'm thinking, like, what do I say? Because he said, "Just improv it." So I go, "I loved you as a kid. I saw you at Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph?" And he looks at me. And he's improving it. So he goes, "What's your name?" For the autograph. And now I'm thinking, and I just go, "Evan." It just dawns on me how surreal this whole thing is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie. How utterly surreal this is. And if you watch the trailer for The Wrestler, there's like 4 or 5 million views of it. There's me in that scene with Mickey in the trailer. So, so it was just, the whole thing was like magic, and very proud of it. So getting back to the film festival, Lincoln Center, New York Film Festival, one of the most prestigious in the world. I'm looking around, and during that scene when Mickey goes, "I'm just a broken down piece of meat," everybody's crying. Everybody's crying, men, women. And I'm like, this works. 7 years we worked on this. I'm like, this works. And the minute the movie ended, there was a spontaneous standing ovation. Spontaneous. And it just dawned on me as it was happening. I go, this is the best night of my life. This right here is the best night of my life. You put 7 years and endless hours of work into something. None of us got rich from it. It's a low budget film, But man, I'll tell you, I tell people all the time, Mickey's performance, he won the Golden Globe, best actor in the world. He lost at the Oscars to Sean Penn for Milk, but he won the Golden Globe. I tell people, because of that performance, people will watch this 100 years from now. They'll watch this film. You don't have to be a wrestling fan to appreciate this film. You don't have to be a boxing fan to appreciate Rocky. There's maybe 13, 14, 15 minutes of wrestling and boxing in The Wrestler and Rocky. So that's why these films are going to stand up. And, somebody said to me, Aronofsky putting you in that film, that was his gift to you. Because long after I'm gone, people watch that movie, and that's like your little sliver of immortality, And I'm not saying it to brag. I'm saying it. I'm humbled to be part of something that great, because let me tell you, Aronofsky, for 6 months, every weekend, I took that guy to wrestling events, wrestling conventions, anything wrestling related. He wanted to do it right. He didn't just slap that thing together, believe me.
That was just trying to get in that mind frame, was it, of just in the zone, I suppose, of the wrestling world, I guess.
He would sit down in the locker room, guys like King Kong Bundy, and just pick their brains and just really, get an understanding of it all. And I took him to Ring of Honor shows where there were thousands of people. I took him to indie shows where there were dozens of people. And again, they were like, where is everybody? Got all these guys killing themselves in the ring, and there's 40 people sitting there. And so he really saw that this wasn't all like glamorous, because the crew, Aronofsky and the executive producer and the screenwriter, these guys were mid-'80s Hulkamania era wrestling fans. And it was pretty glamorous then. It was on MTV. I was showing them the other side of it, that this isn't really, a lot of these guys don't end up well.
Yeah. That you were showing them the kind of the grit and the grime from the kind of the underground, from the bottom, I suppose, as well. Like, and as you said, like, a lot of them don't end up well. And it's a kind of a, when you look at it, it's kind of underappreciated by people, I think, because of that. Some of the casual people would say, as we touched on off camera, oh, it's not real, or it's this and that. But like, a lot of guys have died young because of the business, really.
There have been guys and women who died in the middle of the ring. So, you could say it's not real, but if what the wrestlers say is, my hip replacement was real. My my neck surgery was real. My back surgery was real. My 3 divorces were real, because I was never home. My kid's not talking to me because I was wrestling Survivor Series on Thanksgiving or Starcade on Christmas. I go, that's all real. So, and I've had many, many wrestlers say to me, Evan, I'm always in pain, People have no idea. I've been on the road with these guys. There's Lou Albano in a wheelchair, Iron Sheik in a wheelchair, Harley Race in a wheelchair, Abdullah the Butcher in a wheelchair. I once saw Abdullah the Butcher fall down, and he's so heavy. A lot of these big, strong wrestlers had trouble getting him off the hotel carpet. This is not glamorous, you know. And people don't. So, you know, what irks me is the corporate apologists. Oh, they all know what they're getting into. Like, no, they don't. They don't. They really don't. If you're 20 years old and you have a contract in front of you and this is your dream, you're not thinking, what am I going to feel like at 50 on some rainy, damp day? They're really, you know, you throw your body off a ladder. It's a thrill when you're 22, but what's it going to feel like when you're 42? You know, it's
plus injuries happen in all types of sports. Like, you could go out onto like a football pitch and break your leg, and you might never be the same again, like, as well, you know. But when you touched on being on the road all that time, and I guess that's where the 350 days name came from the documentary. Do you want to talk to me how that came about?
Sure. Another Darren, ironically, Darren Antola, approached me with his partner David Wilkins, his business partner, and he pitched me this documentary. And honestly, at first, you know, I'm just like, I'm not going to top The Wrestler. Why do I want to do another wrestling movie? But the guy was so from the heart, and he just saw wrestling the way I did it. He was like, wasn't Orndorff unbelievable? Wasn't Snooker unbelievable? Wasn't Prime Greg Valentine unbelievable? I go, yeah. It's like, this guy got it. Like, he understood. You know, a lot of the fans, they don't understand because they saw these guys 10 years or 20 years too late. They didn't see these guys in their prime. And he loved Morocco. Unfortunately, Morocco's not in the movie, but we have 36 legends in this movie. We usually bill superstar Billy Graham and Bret Hart as the stars, the quote-unquote stars, but a lot of these guys had a lot of screen time, like Valentine and Tito, and and ironically, that took 6 years to do, and a lot of these guys are gone. I would guesstimate off the top of my head, about 15 of these guys are no longer with us. Orndorff just passed, Ox Baker, Larry Sharp, the Wolfman, etc., so on. I mean, up and down the line, Snook is gone, and just, I would say about 15 of the people in that movie, because we have about 40 wrestlers in there. And so it's a nice, you know, it's kind of like their legacy. And a lot of these guys, nobody was chasing the Canadian Wolfman around with a camera. Let's do an interview. But there he is. You know, we got him. So I saw Bruno wrestle the Wolfman like in 1975, headlining arenas. So a lot of these guys are kind of lost to time, because if you were pre-Hulkamania era, you know, there's not a lot of video footage. There's not a lot of do you know that back in the day, some of the greatest wrestling shows of all time, they would tape over the last week's show, not to keep having to buy new videotapes. So it's just lost the time. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up watching the Florida TV, the LA TV. You know, a lot of it's gone now. Yeah.
And what do you make of modern wrestling then, if we get back to that? And obviously there's AEW. What do you think, first of all, like what they're doing and the product that they're putting out?
For the most part, I'm a big fan of AEW.
Yeah.
Bryan Danielson's tremendous, CM Punk, Pentagon, Phoenix, you know, Young Bucks. I think these guys are unbelievable. And I wish they did more house shows, you know, not just TV tapings.
Yeah, I think there's a big market, even over here in the UK and Ireland, like, because they have a strong following over here. They're going to have to go on the road, I think, at some point.
Yeah, because if I'm watching their TV show, as much as I like and respect them, when they cut in the middle of the match and you have that screen within a screen. The other night they had a battle royale and the guys are like 1 inch tall and you got somebody screaming about pizza on the other side of the screen. It's not ideal. So, you know, I would love to go see AEW, you know, have house shows and, you know, just like any other promotion, because for the most part, I think they're great. Is it flawless? No, but you know, it's certainly better than WWE TV. I know you got the AEW versus WWE fanboy wars where they brutalize each other every day of the week, but come on, you know, Hangman Page and Daniel Bryan on TV is certainly a better experience than Roman Reigns doing the same speech every week. Tribal chief, head of the table. The first
acknowledge me.
Yeah, the first 10,000 times you see it, it's, you know, come on, be honest. But yeah, I'm a fan. I love New Japan. Ring of Honor isn't what it was, but I've always loved and respected Ring of Honor. I get tired of guys my age who do there's been no good wrestling since the territories. I go, you're clueless. You're absolutely clueless. Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness was wrestling elevated to art. Okada and Kenny Omega was wrestling elevated to art. You know, you can't, even Nakamura and AJ Styles in New Japan. That was unbelievable. Unbelievable. So please don't tell me there's been no good wrestling since 1985 or whatever. That's just stupid. Okay.
No, the standard of wrestling, in fairness, probably across the world, even shows that we probably haven't seen, is phenomenal, you know. And there is a lot of wrestling for people out there in things like Fight TV and stuff like that. I see a lot of the kind of like a little mini resurgence, I guess, of independence, particularly in the US as well. I see a lot of companies are now pretty much able to stream their shows from their own small towns every week. It's great for them.
It's a golden age of wrestling now. You see, the thing is, you don't have to be, I'm only a WWE fan, I hate everything else, or I'm only an AEW fan, I hate everything else. That's ridiculous. You pick and choose, and you don't have to watch every match on a 2 or 3 hour show. You know, it's like a buffet. I mean, there's so much great wrestling out there. You know, New Japan, you watch a guy like Tanahashi or, you know, Okada, like I mentioned. These guys are so great. And, you know, Ibushi. I mean, these guys are tremendous, tremendous wrestlers. And, you know, savor it, enjoy it. And you don't have to watch wrestling 24/7 either. I mean, sometimes I like to unwind and just watch a good movie. You know,
exactly.
I like watching boxing. I'm a boxing fan forever. But my point is, there's plenty of good wrestling out there, and to just dismiss it all it's just silly, really.
Yeah. In terms of yourself, then, we'll say with the movie work and things, is there any projects that you're currently working on?
Oh yeah, we have a women's wrestling documentary that's going to come out at some point in the near future, with a lot of the old school women legends, and we don't think that's really been done right, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and you see, when you do any kind of movie, it's the human interest that's important. You could watch wrestling 24 hours a day on YouTube. It's not about the wrestling. It's about the human interest. Imagine it's the 1960s or even 70s. You're a young woman, and you tell your dad, "I'm going on the road. I'm going to be a wrestler." Dad wants to strangle you. Okay, it's like, aren't you going to be in the typing pool and get married and have 3 kids? You know, this is the 1960s. So, you know, that's one project. You know, basically what happened during COVID is, you know, just everything got slowed down. Everything got slowed down, and but we just, keep throwing things out there. I have a book coming out. It's called Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. It's 100 stories about my life, you know, working in wrestling, working as an educator, working on movies, including 7 or 8 stories about making the wrestler that have never been seen before. And I'm senior editor at Pro Wrestling Stories. Very proud of that as well. Quality wrestling history. We don't review Raw. We don't review SmackDown. We don't care. You know, not to sound snobbish, but the history is more interesting to us. And so, you know, you just throw a lot of things out there, and some land and some don't. And that's the way of the world. And some projects blow up and some projects implode. You know, it is what it is. It's you know, the movie business is a tough business. People don't realize. Like I said before, 7 years on The Wrestler, 6 years on 350 Days. Not rich from either, but proud as hell of both of them. Yeah.
What I always say, if you throw enough shit at the wall, something is going to stick to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Your show could get syndicated one day and have 1 million viewers. You never know how far you could take things.
Well, we're actually on a milestone now today, 200,000 views. So that's decent for...
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm making a 50 cent a day now on YouTube.
Hey, that Wrestling Then and Now documentary we did 20 years ago. I'd be embarrassed to tell you the royalty checks we get from that. You know, I'd be embarrassed. But yeah, man, I get it. But if you love doing the show, you don't know how far you could take it. They always say, do what you love and the money comes later. And that's really true. It's really true. Yeah.
Yeah. Evan, listen, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, man. And I hope to catch up with you maybe when that women's documentary is going to come out, and we'll chat about that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I have a little document. I'm not the producer. I was interviewed for a documentary on Roddy Piper that's going to be on ITV. And
oh, brilliant!
Yeah. So that'll be out sometime this year. And I was just one of the interview subjects because I grew up on Piper. Piper would come out heel Madison Square Garden. And the best way I could explain it, Roddy Piper, 1984 or 5, is he would come out, it would be absolute chaos, and then you could breathe again. Then you could breathe again when it ended. Heel Piper, you can't even imagine the excitement in that building. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. And, you know, again, if anybody says, oh, he just punched and kicked, they don't get it. They don't get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say that Punk is near enough, or well, not as good, but would you say that CM Punk is close to him on the microphone these days, or even MJF maybe?
I think they're great. I think if I sit down to listen to an interview, the guy's a good talker, because most of the time I barely even pay attention. Especially WWE, it's so scripted and stilted, and you've heard it all before. But Kevin Owens is a good talker in WWE. Kevin Owens, yeah. CM Punk is a good talker. MJF is great. MJF's tremendous. He's from my neck of the woods. He's not far, you know, Long Island, New York. But yeah, he's going to be just a monster star in this business, MJF, because he could wrestle too. He could back it up. He could back it up. It's very rare to get, you know, I hate to use the word total package, but it's very rare to get somebody who has a great character, great wrestler, great talker, great charisma, put all those pieces together, and the right promoter that appreciates it. You know, years ago, I'm sitting in Madison Square Garden, and you had Steve Austin in a prelim before they turned him into Stone Cold. Okay, and it was just like another body on the card, and then somehow they figured it out, and this guy was like the biggest thing in the business. So you also need the right booker, promoter to see the potential. I mean, WWE just let go hundreds of people. You can't tell me nobody in that group was worthy. You know, somebody didn't see the potential of somebody in there. And like the one guy, like I don't get, like Morrison. That guy's so great. How is somebody not making this guy like a huge monster star? I don't get it. That guy's a total package.
Yeah, I mean, so technically gifted as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Evan, pleasure anyway. Really appreciate you.
Anytime. I appreciate you having me, and you know.
We'll definitely catch up again.
Definitely. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Evan.
My pleasure. Okay.